This is a MDMA, ecstasy, LSD and cannabis trip report by New Rainbow Child, posted to arrowwood.org on October 7th, 2010. It was a regular Saturday night when I first felt the pull towards something different. I had been waiting for a good batch of Molly for many months. The last time I had taken a decent dose, I had felt the kind of warmth and openness that stays with you for a while. This time I finally had a small bag that looked promising. I had also been smoking cannabis almost every day for the past 3 months, and I could feel the tolerance building. My friend H was at my apartment with me. She was sober, calm, and seemed ready to watch me have a night. I was nervous at first. I did not know if the feeling would be right, but I also knew that I would thank myself later if I went through with it. I sat at the kitchen table, turned on a small digital scale, and measured out about 100 milligrams of the white powder. I placed the measured amount into a small piece of paper, folded it into a tiny parachute, and swallowed it with a glass of water. The taste was bitter, and I felt a little odd as the paper slid down my throat. I could feel a faint tingling at the back of my throat, a sign that the substance was beginning to enter my bloodstream. I set a timer for 40 minutes, the usual time it takes for MDMA to reach its peak. I turned on some low-volume music, lit a candle, and tried to relax. My thoughts drifted to the intention I had set for the night. I wanted to feel loved, to feel connected, to let go of the small worries that had been nagging me for weeks. I also hoped that the night would give me a chance to see some parts of myself that I usually keep hidden. After about 10 minutes, I noticed a slight warmth spreading from my chest outward. My heart beat a little faster, and I could feel my fingers tingle. I told H that I was feeling something, and she smiled and put on a playlist that she thought would match my mood. The music was a mix of electronic beats and soft synths. It was not too loud, but it filled the room with a steady pulse. By the time the timer went off, I could feel the change fully. The room seemed brighter, the colors on the walls more saturated. My skin felt like it was humming with a gentle vibration. I stood up and began to move. I started dancing in a way that felt both ecstatic and deliberate. My arms moved in wide circles, my feet found a rhythm that seemed to come from deep inside. I could feel each muscle in my body responding to the music, as if the music were a wave that I was riding. H watched me and laughed. She said, "You look like a child who just discovered fire." I laughed back, feeling a surge of joy. I began to talk rapidly, my words spilling out faster than usual. I told H about the things that had been on my mind for months, about the small anxieties that kept me awake at night. I tried to get her to open up as well, asking her about her life, about the things she kept hidden. She answered slowly at first, then more freely as the night went on. I found myself analyzing her responses, trying to see patterns, trying to give her a mirror for her own thoughts. At some point, I felt a sudden urge to add another layer to the experience. I reached into a drawer where I kept a small stockpile of blotter paper. The paper was bright, covered with a rainbow of colors, and the name Rainbow Children was printed on the edge. I took 3 hits from the blotter, feeling the paper dissolve under my tongue. The taste was sweet and slightly metallic. H looked at me with a hint of concern. She said, "You did not plan on taking acid tonight." I smiled and replied that I felt confident in my decision and that I was excited for what might happen. I could feel a new wave of anticipation rising in my chest. H asked if I wanted to go outside and run with her. I said yes without hesitation. I grabbed a bottle of water, a small pacifier that I kept for comfort, and slipped on my shoes. As we opened the door, 2 friends, John and Joey, appeared out of nowhere. They had heard about the night and decided to drop by. We greeted them, and together we set up a small vaporizer on the kitchen counter. We loaded it with a bowl of cannabis and inhaled the thick, sweet smoke. The 3 of us shared a few puffs, the room filling with a familiar earthy scent. John and Joey wished me luck and left, their footsteps echoing down the hallway as they departed. We stepped out onto the quiet street, the night air cool against my skin. The city lights were dim, but the sky above was clear enough to see a few stars. We began to jog at a comfortable pace, the rhythm of our feet matching the beat that still lingered in my ears. My heart began to race faster than before, and I felt a lightness in my head. I slowed down after a few minutes, realizing that I was becoming light-headed. I stopped, took a deep breath, and drank some water from my bottle. The cool liquid soothed my throat and helped settle the rapid thumping in my chest. At that moment, the LSD began to take hold. The world around me seemed to shift in subtle ways. The streetlights turned into columns of color, each one pulsing with its own frequency. The pavement beneath my shoes felt like a living surface, breathing in tiny motions that I could not see but could sense. I felt as if I were moving in and out of a space-time fabric, as if I were dancing with something larger than myself. We continued walking until we reached a small park attached to an elementary school. The grass was soft, the air smelled of fresh-cut lawn and faint hints of jasmine from nearby bushes. I felt an overwhelming urge to lie down, to let the ground support my body. I lowered myself onto the grass, feeling the cool blades against my skin. I stared up at the sky, and the clouds above were a swirl of pink, orange, and violet, as if a painter had brushed them with a giant brush. The stars seemed to rain down, tiny points of light that flickered and fell like glitter. Every sense seemed amplified. The sound of a distant car was a deep hum that resonated in my chest. The scent of the grass was sharp, each blade releasing its own fragrance. I could see the individual molecules that made up the air, the grass, the clouds. They glowed with a faint inner light, as if each particle held a tiny spark. My vision blended color and sound together. I could hear the colors humming, and I could see the sounds as ripples in the air. I felt a profound sense that everything was alive. The grass was breathing, the clouds were inhaling and exhaling. Even the stone bench nearby seemed to pulse with a slow, steady rhythm. I realized that the universe was made of one basic building block, a fractal pattern that repeated itself at every scale. This pattern was not cold or sterile, it was pure love, a force that created and was created at the same time. I understood that this love was the source of all things, that it was both the painter and the painting. I thought about how nothing was static. All things were moving, even those that appeared still. The atoms in the bench were vibrating at a frequency so low that my ordinary senses could not detect it, but under the influence I could see their motion as a gentle wave. I felt tears rise in my eyes, not from sadness but from a deep joy that came from recognizing that everything was part of a continuous cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. The cycle was infinite, and being a part of it meant being alive. I reflected on the sound that many people call. I felt that I finally understood its meaning. The vibration of that sound was the same as the vibration of the fractal pattern I was seeing. I realized that because everything was made of love, everything was whole at every moment. I could not be separate from that love. I was love, and love was inside me. This thought gave me a comfort that settled deep in my chest. I felt a sense of safety, as if I would never be alone. H, who was lying next to me, asked where fear fit into this picture. I looked at her and saw her face lit by the soft glow of the sky. I thought for a moment, then answered that fear was simply a lack of awareness of love, a flaw in perception. I could feel the truth of that statement resonating through my body. I continued to gaze at the clouds, watching them change shape, their edges shimmering with iridescent colors around the moon. At times I felt as if I were floating up with them, becoming part of their movement. The night was still young, and the sky continued to shift. A faint light turned on in the school building across the street. H whispered that she thought she saw someone moving inside. We decided that we had been trespassing, and that it would be best to leave before anything happened. We rose from the grass, brushed the dirt from our clothes, and walked back toward my apartment. The air felt cooler now, and the streetlights seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I could still feel the music inside my head, a soft rhythm that guided each step. When we entered the hallway, I felt a surge of creative energy. I laid a yoga mat on the floor outside the living room and sat down, still looking up at the ceiling as if it were a window to the universe. I reached for a canvas and a set of paints that I kept for moments like this. My hands moved without thinking, mixing colors randomly, splashing bright reds, deep blues, and shimmering golds onto the surface. The brush strokes were erratic, each one a burst of feeling. H watched me and said that she liked how free I was being. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. I decided to take 2 more hits of the LSD blotter, feeling that the journey was still unfolding. I thought about adding more Molly or even some shrooms, but I chose to stay within the limits I had set for myself. I wanted the experience to remain vivid, but not to become chaotic. I turned my attention back to H, hoping to share the peace and love I had discovered. I tried to talk to her about her life, to help her find the same illumination that I felt. As I spoke, I imagined that I could see which parent had given her certain traits, and her face seemed to melt between the two parents, the cheekbones shifting, the eyes flickering from one set to the other as if a projector were running a slideshow of her lineage. I watch the changes and feel a pulse of curiosity rise in my chest. I point to the left side and say, "That is your mother's smile, the one that always hides a secret." She nods slowly, the smile widening just enough to match the image I have drawn in my mind. I feel a wave of warmth travel from my throat down to my hands, and I realize that the MDMA is still humming in my bloodstream, keeping my heart steady while the LSD paints everything with bright edges. I try to keep the conversation flowing, asking her what she wants to be, what she feels pulls her forward. She shrugs, her shoulders lifting and falling in a rhythm that matches the beat of the music still playing in the background. The music has become a low hum, a vibration that I can feel in the floorboards. I notice that the colors in the room have deepened, the walls now breathing a soft orange that seems to pulse with each breath I take. I reach out and touch the canvas I was painting earlier. The brush strokes are still wet, the pigments glistening like tiny lakes. I dip my finger into the paint and feel the cool slickness, and I smile, feeling that the act of creating is still a bridge between my mind and the world. I tell H that the love I felt earlier is still there, that it can be shared like a light that does not dim when it is passed on. I say, imagine a shape that you can hold, a shape that contains the feeling of being whole. She looks at me with eyes that are half cloud, half fire, and she whispers, "I do not know what that shape looks like." I feel a sudden knot in my stomach, a flicker of panic that spreads like a cold draft. The MDMA is beginning to lose its grip, and the LSD is now moving in waves, pulling me forward and then pulling me back. I ask her again, "What do you feel when you think about being free?" She sighs, a sound that seems to echo in the room, and says, "I feel stuck, like I am breathing through a straw." I watch her breath, the rise and fall of her chest, and I notice that the air feels thicker, as if it is saturated with a heavy scent of iron. I try to push the feeling of love into a shape for her, but the shape feels like a tangled ball of rope, and I cannot untie it. I feel the energy I called out earlier now sitting on my shoulders, a weight that I cannot shift. The room begins to darken, the bright oranges turning to muted grays. The music fades to a low thrum that I can feel in my bones. I feel my heart beat slower, the rush of MDMA fading, leaving behind a hollow that the LSD tries to fill with strange images. I see a hallway that stretches into darkness, the walls lined with mirrors that reflect my own face. But each reflection shows a different version of me. One with tears, one with a smile, one with a frown. I try to focus on the mirror that shows the smiling version, but the image flickers and disappears. I hear H's voice become distant, as if she is speaking from the other side of a thick wall. She says, "I am scared. I do not want to feel this." The words hit me like cold water, and I feel a surge of sadness that is not mine. I realize that the energy I tried to give her has now turned into a pressure that I am forced to carry. I feel my chest tighten, a knot forming that makes it hard to breathe. I try to inhale deeply to fill my lungs with the air that feels like it is weighted with ash. I stand up from the yoga mat, my legs feeling both heavy and light at the same time. I walk to the balcony, the door left ajar, and I look out at the street below. The night is dark, the streetlights are dim, and I notice that my cat, the black one that usually sits on the sill, is not there. I feel a pang of loss, a sharp sting that spreads through my chest. I call her name Misty, and the sound of my own voice sounds hollow. I stare at the empty space where she usually perches, and I feel a wave of fear rise, a feeling that something is missing, that I have lost a part of myself. The fear grows, and with it a chorus of harsh voices that seem to come from inside my head. The voices shout words that are vulgar and angry, a stream of insults that bounce off the walls of my mind. They say, "You are worthless, you are a failure, you are nothing." The words are relentless, each one striking like a slap. I try to cover my ears, but the sound is inside, echoing in the hollow of my skull. My hands shake, my fingers curl around the balcony railing, and I feel the metal cold against my skin. I try to calm myself by breathing, counting each inhale and exhale. I whisper, "I am breathing, I am safe." The words feel weak against the storm of voices, but they are a small anchor. I reach into my pocket and pull out the melatonin I kept for emergencies, the GABA pills I had on hand. I swallow them with a sip of water, hoping the chemicals will quiet the storm. The taste is bitter, the water cool on my tongue. I wait, feeling the minutes stretch, each second feeling like an hour. My stomach growls, reminding me that I have not eaten in many hours. I realize that I am weak, my body demanding fuel. I go back inside, open the kitchen, and prepare a bowl of cereal with raisins, strawberries, and raspberries. The colors of the fruit are vivid, the red of the strawberries, the purple of the berries, the gold of the raisins. I pour the milk, watch it swirl around the grains, and I feel a small smile return to my face. I sit at the table and eat slowly, each bite bringing a sense of grounding, a feeling that my body is receiving what it needs. As I eat, the sky outside begins to change. The darkness of night is giving way to a faint pink glow on the horizon. The clouds are lit with a soft fuchsia hue, and the first light of sunrise starts to push back the shadows. I watch the light grow, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. The harsh voices in my head begin to fade, the volume lowering until they are just a faint hum. I feel the weight on my shoulders lift, as if a burden has been set down. I notice a flash of movement on the balcony. My cat, Misty, has returned, her sleek black fur catching the early light. She jumps onto the railing and then slips inside, curling up on the couch.